Hi, I'm Clate Mask, and on the Conquer the Chaos podcast, I talk with inspiring business owners about what it takes to build a great business and a great life. That means more money, more time, more control, more impact, more freedom. So keep listening to hear the tough lessons they learned so you don't have to repeat them. Welcome, everyone, to this episode of the Conquer the Chaos podcast. I am Clate Mask, your co-host, the co-founder and CEO of Keep. And I'm really excited today because we've got an AI expert, a personal development expert, a friend that I'm excited to introduce to the Conquer the Chaos community, Joe Stolte. Great to be with you, Joe. Thanks for being here.
Clate, it's an honor to be here. This is exciting. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. So why don't you give the audience a little bit of background? I mean, AI is all the rage, and what kind of self-respecting podcast would we be if we didn't have something about AI in our conversation? So, but there's much more to it, obviously, as it relates to the 6 keys to success for entrepreneurs. Why don't you just take a second and talk about Daily AI? Just give a little intro to our audience about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I'm Joe Stolte. I'm a 5-time technology founder. I've had 3 successful exits, 2 spectacular failures that, of course, I learned more from the failures than I did from my successes, as we tend to do. And, the last company that we sold, that company was under contract to be sold. And I reached out to my coach at the time, who's a phenomenal guy. His name's Brian Franklin, and he coached people like Reid Hoffman and a bunch of other unicorn CEOs. Just a spectacular human being. And I was like, hey, for my next adventure, I'd really like to work on something kind of at the intersection of AI or machine learning and email or marketing. Do you happen to know anybody? He's like, it's funny that you say that, because my friend Evan Pagan and Dr. Peter Diamandis have this product that's not out in the market that's doing something in that stratosphere. You should talk to them. So I did, and I became the CEO of what's now called Daily.ai. And what we do is we build AI automated email newsletters that get 40 to 60% open rates without spending any more than 5 minutes of your time a week to look at the content that's going out to your customers. And the secret sauce, the thing that makes it really special, is it's not just generative AI making stuff for you. It's actually looking at what every single one of your subscribers is doing, and it's getting smarter and smarter and smarter based on what they're actually doing, so that it can curate your content and third-party content that's most aligned with what they're clicking on and how they're engaging. One thing I like to say is that as a marketer, there's 3 forms of truth. There's what the brand thinks the market wants, there's what the market says that they want, and then there's what they actually click on. So we want to know all 3. We just want to over-index on that third one so that we're giving them the right content that's within kind of the spectrum of the brand in terms of what they want to share with their audience, that they want to read right now, and then build an algorithm that makes it smarter and smarter and smarter over time. So that's who I am, and that's what we're up to.
Joe, awesome. So obviously I'm interested in this too, because, automation and marketing automation, specifically the email marketing, is, it's a big part of what we do. It's a big part of how we get our messages out to our audiences, whether that's customers or prospects or members, or, whatever it is. But if we aren't getting those messages read, then what good is it doing? And as we all know, it's really tough to get messages through to people. And, the age-old maxim of, good marketing is sending the right message to the right market at the right time. Well, you guys are doing something that really tips the deck, weights the deck in your favor in terms of the timing and getting the right message to the right audience. So I love what you're doing. I mean, what I'm hearing you say is it's generative AI combined with hyper relevance and timeliness for customers, because it's the AI is responding to their behaviors and making sure that what is delivered to them makes the most sense for them based on those behaviors.
Yeah, that's exactly right. The thing we really want to capture as marketers, as people that are in the business of grabbing and directing other people's attention, is we want to understand their intent. And the thing about intent is fluid, right? Mm-hmm. On September 10th, 2001, your intent was different than on September 12th, 2001, because something really important happened in the middle if you're in America, right? Well, some micro version of that, but less extreme, is happening all the time in the war for our attention, right? You're really focused on one thing and you're locked in, and then bam, something hijacks your attention and your intent completely shifts. So how does that show up from a marketing perspective? Well, maybe I have a problem I'm trying to solve and I'm researching solutions. I'm looking for stuff, but I'm totally enthralled and trying to figure out, well, what do I do about this? And then, my 5-year-old son comes in and is like, hey, my little sister just pooped all over the floor. I'm like, oh no, and now my frame is totally
Attention
changed.
gone. Right.
Yeah, my
Right.
intent's totally different, or I'm on vacation in Europe. And so I'm not, so if you send me an offer after that, because my intent has completely shifted. Like I may even forget that I was looking for that solution. Maybe I opted into something half-heartedly and just abandoned it. So I think it's really important to understand intent and building tools and capabilities to understand like how is that intent, that fluid intent changing over time. But you nailed what we do. One other thing I wanted to say is I do think marketing, it's about getting the right message to the right person at the right time over the right channel with the right offer. Everything but the offer can mostly be solved with math, meaning like just looking at enough data. And so what people I think don't often realize inside of that paradigm is that up to 40% of the content as a marketer that you put into the marketplace actually pushes your prospect away from the sale because it's intrusive. It's the wrong message at the wrong time on the wrong channel, right? And so that's the slippery slope. And so our vision is like, how do we help all small businesses market without being marketers? By using data to arm them with these kinds of things so they can just get a lot farther faster in the conversation with their customers. So newsletters for us is like the opening act, and there's so much more that we have planned after that. But that you nailed it. That's exactly how we think about it, and that's exactly what we do.
Well, it's super fascinating because it increases, can increase the effectiveness so much. When I think about automation, and we talk a lot, I talk on this podcast quite a bit with people around automation because it's a way for entrepreneurs to buy back their time. It's a way for them to get greater yield out of their efforts. It's a way for them to grow their business without having to put so much in. I mean, at some point, labor plus capital equals output, and it's like, well, if you automate, you can do a lot more. And so we talk about this a lot. We talk about automation, but the way what you're describing, the overlay of AI, it creates a level of smart automation that improves the effectiveness of our marketing considerably. And when you look at the customer strategy across a business where we're trying to get the messages, we're trying to move the customer through our experiences or our products or ways that are going to improve their lives and make their businesses better, it's really tough to compete with all the noise. It's really tough to get that message through. So when you take something like you've described, it dramatically improves the effectiveness. And I know you've got a solution where some of our customers at Keep are using your solution. Why don't you take just a second more? You kind of left off at newsletters and what you do with newsletters. Yeah. And maybe, what's the automation there that's happening? And then what is it that maybe it's kind of a standard automation without your AI, just for people to kind of connect to. And then you can add the AI part. Well, why don't I take the first part? You take the second part and make it really fun. So I think everybody knows that sending regularly scheduled emails out in a weekly fashion, monthly fashion, but having some kind of a nurture through an email newsletter is one of the most common ways that marketers, business owners, entrepreneurs will stay in touch with and stay top of mind of their customers. But it can become very stale. It can become just another thing that lands in their inbox. So talk to us about what you do with your newsletters and what that version looks like that applies AI.
Yeah, absolutely. And in the context of automation, just as like a frame, let's go up a level meta, right?
Yeah.
Before automation, like a best practice that I've observed and applied and found is quite useful is elimination. What can we get rid of? What activity that doesn't even need to take place in the first place can we get rid of? Yes. And then automate the things that do need to take place. And so in some capacity, what we would love to do is be able to say, all right, if you don't want to receive the message and you are not engaging, let's eliminate you from the send. Because that's like hurting your email deliverability. It's sending stuff to people that they don't want, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And let's get that right message to the right person at the right time. So right off the bat, if you don't want the message, and that's clear, before I push you with more messaging to push you to opt out, let's just not send you the message. Let's not automate it. So that's one part of it. But another part of it is here, I'll describe what our newsletters look like. And if you wanted to see an example, you can go to daily.ai and see it. It's effectively a news feed. You see, what we found is that there's pre-existing behaviors that already exist inside of human beings when it comes to marketing that you can just latch into. One of them is scrolling. For better or for worse, a non-trivial amount of human beings spend a lot of time with their head craned down and their phone in their hand scrolling. LinkedIn, Facebook, TikTok, news sites, whatever. Everything is a scroll, right? It's an image, it's a headline, it's some text, and you just keep scrolling. What we did is when we looked at newsletters, we went out and looked at and said, hey, there's a lot of really good newsletters that I subscribe to that I get to it, and it's a bunch of text, and I want to read it, but I'm busy, so I go, man, I'm just going to read this one later. But in the world of marketing, later is never. I call that the readability burden. If it's got too much text or too much text clumped together, then you just don't want to read it, right? So the first thing that we did to really kind of make it effective is we broke it up and we made it look like a news feed, something you might see like in an Instagram, right? And we tried to give 3 or 4 thumb scrolls, which is 7 to 11 pieces of content, along with your ad, which we call a conversion card. Now, this is not an ad for a third-party product and service. This is your ad. This is like a CTA in your newsletter to go get out of the newsletter and get into your sales process. Otherwise, it's other people's content mixed with your content that's delivered to your customers automatically. So it grabs the content, it either pulls the image from that content or uses AI to make an image, depending on if the AI thinks that image is strong enough. It rewrites the headline, and then it summarizes the content in bite-sized chunks so that your audience can quickly scan through it and get a bunch of value from scrolling through it. Whether that's your content or third-party content, the goal isn't to start with why am I so cool? The goal is to start with what's in it for them. What's the best possible little chunks of content that I could give my audience that they would appreciate, they would find value of, and then I can mix that with my stuff. So we built this thing called the Perspective Engine. It goes and looks at over 3 million pieces of content a day, and it filters out negative news and clickbait, and it filters in what we call future forward positive news. That creates something in readers that we call dopamine. So it's that plus, your brand preferences to deliver content to your ideal customer profile. And that's what ends up in the feed. So all of that is automated, and you get a version of that newsletter in your inbox as the publisher, and it takes 5 minutes to review it. And now there's a little box somewhere in there. When I say a box, it's like a little piece of content with like 3 or 4 bullet points of other articles. And that would be like Clate's picks. That's personalized for Clate based on how Clate has interacted with your newsletter. That's personalized just for him. And so each of the subscribers is now getting a personalized version of the newsletter. So we've taken this whole process, if you look at the data, pre-AI, it took 1 to 3 weeks, not days or hours, but weeks to go from starting from scratch to sending a piece of marketing content to your audience on average for a small business. And we've completely compressed the whole thing down where it's done. And all you have to do is take about 5 minutes to review it. And if you don't like it, you can eliminate articles, send feedback, whatever. It's a very quick review process, and then it's ready to send. So that we have customers, and even we send newsletters every day, 5 days a week, 20 cents a month, right? Because it's so easy. So anyway, that's a lot to digest, but we've taken the whole newsletter process and we've found the best way to get people's attention and update that over time and make it really easy so you don't have to spend any time on it.
That's really fascinating. It's such an interesting study to look at human behavior and what has become so habitual for people when they're consuming information on their phones. And you're right. I mean, everything, what you just described, the formatting, I think if our listeners think about it, the formatting of everything you look at from your, your news sites to your Instagram or Facebook to, TikTok, everything is what you just described. Image, headline, a little bit of copy, and it's, and people are just scrolling through it. And it's like, it's a really smart thing to take that format and put it into a newsletter that customers that recipients can go through to get the information that your business is interested in conveying to them in a format that they're used to, in a kind of a layout that's very familiar, so that they're clicking on your CTAs because it's part of their habitual behavior. So I think it's really fascinating what you guys are doing. So tell us how that's working. What are you seeing? How are people using that technology to automate more of their marketing?
Yeah, absolutely. We have kind of two different customer segments. We have one segment, which is we'll just call like famous thought leaders, right? These are like the Chris Vosses and the Dr. Peter Diamandis of the world, or the Joe Polishes or the JJ Virgins. Like I could keep going. We have, and I think 22 different Wall Street Journal or New York Times bestselling authors that just use this to connect their audience to the content from the book and give them a touch at least every week to show up and add value so that they continue to make those CTAs. That's one way. And then we've got several hundred brands that you've probably never heard of, everybody from real estate to plastic surgeons, to insurance professionals, private equity firms, venture capitalists, coaches, consultants, authors. I could keep going. 37 different industries where they're just using this as a strategy to stay in touch with their audience in terms of the middle of funnel, right? If the top of the funnel is getting leads in and getting people to pay attention to me for the first time, and the bottom is getting them to convert and buy my stuff, the middle is where you give them that big value hug and you show up for them. One thing we say is that, consistency creates trust, and trust creates transactions. So what we're trying to do is be that consistent engine that can show up every month or every week, or in some cases every day, with valuable content so that we can stay top of mind as a brand and understand your intent. Where's it going and how's it slipping around? One other thing I'll say is a helpful mental model that we love is the 7-11-4 rule. Google did a study some years ago that basically tracked, hey, how do you convert on the consumer side, someone that's never heard of you, into a paying customer? And looking at all their data, they determined that it takes about 7 hours of interactions across 11 different touch points and 4 different platforms or channels. So if you think about it, we really automate that middle part, right? 11 different touch points. So if you have a newsletter and it goes out every week, when you've gotten a lead, we're going to help chip away at those 11 touch points. If you're doing anything else, ad retargeting, sending other emails, doing sales calls, like posting social media content, that's going to help get the 4 channels, increase the touch points, etc. But we're just chipping away at those 11 touch points, right? Yeah. And the more time you spend in the newsletter, the more value they attribute to the brand, right? And so that's another thing that we do, that we just try to think about that customer journey. We don't solve all of it. We're very specifically paying attention to the middle, and we're trying to be as great as we can to turn it from the middle to the bottom to drive clicks, leads, book demos, that kind of thing.
Okay, we're going to keep this going, but first, a quick message for you. Conquer the Chaos listeners, let me talk to you straight for just a minute. You're running your business and it dominates your mind. It can be very difficult to take a step back and see what's needed to create balance in your business and your personal life, and to create great growth and development and progress in your business and personal life. One of the most powerful ways to gain the perspective that you need is to get away from things and immerse yourself in an environment where you're going to be inspired, where you can see possibilities, where you can create connections, and where you can learn and grow and develop. And I know of no better place for entrepreneurs than Keep's Let's Grow Summit. For years, we ran this conference as just an amazing mecca for entrepreneurship. And then, truth be told, for a few years, we didn't run it. We got back to it last year, and this year we're putting it on, and it is going to be awesome. I am so excited about this, and I want you as our listeners to not miss out on this event. It's going to be November 20th through the 22nd, downtown Phoenix, with the main days being the 21st and the 22nd. You can register for it by going to keep.com/Let's Grow Summit. That's keep.com/Let's Grow Summit. And you can take advantage of our early bird registration pricing, which expires the end of July. So if you are needing a reflection time, an opportunity to take a step back, gain greater perspective, inspiration, and most of all, see what automation, the 5th key to success, can do for your business, then make sure that you attend the Let's Grow Summit. Keep.com/Let's Grow Summit, November 20th through 22nd in Phoenix. I look forward to seeing you there. All right, now back to our chat. Well, I love what you said, that, consistency creates trust, trust creates transactions. Everything you're describing is the science behind follow-up. And it's, what I've taught and shared over, for years, the fortunes in the follow-up, the consistency of being there because we can't control the timing. We can't control the intent, and we can't control the attention span of people. We can just be there when the time is right for them. And, what you're describing creates not only that consistency, but the relevance. And so I love it. By the way, when I heard, a while back when I heard the 7-11-4 rule from Google, I was like, well, yeah, I mean, this is what people have said forever. It takes, 7 to 12 impressions. And of course, those are going to take some time over, those touches take some time. And then, everybody has recognized that when you can get people, get in front of people on multiple forms of media, multiple channels, multiple ways of touching them, it's not additive. It's multiple, it multiplies. It's when people see you on, when they hear your business on the radio, they see you in their phone advertising to them, and then they also get some, they see a billboard or something. All these things converge, and the power of that is, what Google's describing in the 4 channels. So I love what you shared there, and I just, for all of our audience, I would reinforce when we talk about customer strategy, which is the 4th key to success for entrepreneurs, the first of the business keys, it's that customer strategy of consistent follow-up across the customer journey. And you guys really focus on the middle and getting those 11 touch points where you're building value, as you said, the hug in the middle of the funnel. So I love that. Well, let's, in a minute, I'll definitely give you a chance to share where people can learn more about you. But you and I were talking kind of in the green room before, and you said that, you caught my attention because you said you've been studying neurolinguistic programming for 15 years. You're a huge personal development geek, as am I. And so I say that with lots of love because I do absolutely love it. And so we talked for a second about mindset. And I want you to take a minute because you've built 3 successful businesses that have sold. You've had 2 spectacular failures, in your own words, and you learned so much from those. What did you learn about mindset in going through the successes and the failures as a personal development guru, really? I mean, you're a total student of it. What did you learn about your mindset? And what did you learn that would be helpful for our listeners as they're practicing entrepreneurship and working on their mindset?
Yeah, probably one of the biggest things that I learned, there's a handful of things. Number one, what I learned about learning, and I learned this from NLP, is that learning is not memorizing something. Learning is evidenced by behavior change. So if I got the information in, I digested it, and then I changed the way that I show up in the world, that's what real learning looks like. Anybody can memorize anything, and that's kind of how we're taught at school. Memorize it, take the test, get the grade. But if it doesn't actually,
if you're not doing it, you haven't actually learned it.
That's it. If you haven't transformed, you haven't transformed. It's all in your head. By the way,
I think that point, I came to that realization one time many years ago after going to a conference, and my lizard brain was telling me, you already know this. And then my wiser self said, yeah, but you're not doing it. So who cares if you know it? And, as I've gotten older, I've realized that what you just said is some of the best wisdom that I think my younger self could have absorbed. That it was like, hey, who cares if you know it if you're not doing it? Do you really know it if you're not doing it? And I think that way of learning, and how many of us have gone through and said, gosh, I'm learning this thing again and again. I wish I didn't have to keep learning something over and over. It'd be really nice if I could learn it and just do it consistently forever. And yet that's not how we are as human beings. We have to learn it again and do it again. And so I appreciate that perspective of, if it hasn't transformed you, if it hasn't really changed you, have you really learned it? So how do you go deeper on that? How do you, for those of us who always are struggling with, hey, I'm trying to get better at this thing, and we, feel like we're taking a step back. I say all the time, the whole point of working on this stuff, this practice, is to make progress, not to be perfect. But what did you learn, and what do you tell yourself in those times where you take a step back, where you find that you're not doing what you thought you had learned?
Yeah, well, another powerful thing that I learned in the mindset game is that at any given time, you're really only ever in one of 2 states of mind. I'll just call it like a pain state and a power state. A pain state would be like, fear, overwhelm, anxiety, frustration, jealousy, envy, and a power state might be like curiosity, creativity, joy, love, etc. And
Yep.
so what happens is if I've learned something and I want to go implement it in the world, the gap between understanding and action, right, is either I know what to do and I know how to do it, or I've got an internal blocker, right? And
Yeah.
so if I've
Yeah.
got some kind of internal blocker, like I need to work through that. And a lot of times I think what happens is people fail and that becomes a muscle memory, a whole behavior around failure, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
bad, you did it wrong. Whereas one thing I've learned is if I ever want to bridge out of a pain state to a power state, I just try to get curious. Curiosity is
Mm.
a better state of consciousness. It's a power state. It just, if I can get into curiosity, like, why did that, how did I
Yeah.
forget to
Yeah.
not pay the parking meter and got a ticket? What's the lesson I'm supposed to get from that? Curiosity opens the floodgates of what's possible for me, and it moves away the heart palpitations and the anxiety and the judgment of I did it wrong and all that
Yep.
kind of stuff. And it just gets me back into, what could I do to not do that again? That's silly. And so like that curiosity bridge is a big one for me. Another thing that I learned from like an old mentor of mine, Wyatt Woodsmall, is like if you want to achieve a dramatic outcome in your life, sometimes you have to become not you. The version of you
Yeah.
that wants that outcome is not capable of that. So if you start
Yep.
with the identity transformation instead of like the big goal or the process you're going to use to get the goal, it can help you embody the person you need to become faster. And for me personally, I'm not saying this is universally true for everybody, but when I was I grew up in a farm town of less than 1,000 people. We didn't have any money. We didn't know anybody that had any money. So to go from that to entrepreneur, I had to become a different kind of person. And at
Had to
some
reset your
level, there's
identity. Yeah.
that's right. And I don't think like Ken Wilber talks about I transcended and included that farm version of me. It's still in there like a Russian doll, like a mini Russian doll. I just put other dolls on top of that because I've
Yes.
grown. And
Well,
so
you
I don't
you
judge.
introduced yourself as growing up in a farm. It's still part of your identity, but you've evolved that identity to create space for the successful entrepreneur. And you've did it. What I'm hearing you say, Joe, is you did it by focusing on the two realms of emotion. You've got power and you've got pain, and you realize that the bridge to move to the more effective side is curiosity.
That's it. And if I'm curious and I'm not in fight or flight, I don't have my parasympathetic nervous system keeping me stuck, then it's a lot easier for me to move forward and take action. And action is how we evidence behavior change, right? So it's like I
Yep.
wanted to pick up a meditation habit. About 12 years ago, my father passed away from cancer and I'd never meditated. So I
Mm.
took a course on meditation and I wanted to meditate. And I heard a joke one time. It was like, well, how do I implement a new habit? It was like, cool. It's like 2 steps: get started and don't stop. So I was like, okay. So I was like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to go and I had moved from Seattle to Venice Beach, California, which is a beautiful setting to do this. And I would just go to the beach every single morning and I meditated every day just so I could get an anchor in the chaos that was my life. I had just moved. I just got married. My father just passed away. So I just did that. And man, did that change my behavior. Well, first of all, I changed my behavior where I wasn't meditating. Now I'm meditating, but it completely gave me a whole new access to stillness. But I'd never really
Yeah.
been accustomed to stillness. And so
Yeah.
that's how I change my behavior is I actually do, when I learn something, I realize that like thinking is a low cost activity. Talking is a slightly higher cost activity, but not by much. Doing is a much higher cost activity. So if I want to be a strategist, I have to be very careful about what I do because that's what's going to create my character, right? So I'm very careful about what I do, and what I do, I try to go all in on it and feel it, embody it. I'm like on the Colby score. My Colby score, I'm a fairly low fact finder, but I have a high, I like high quick
Follow.
start and high follow through. I just like to go do stuff, feel if that's right for me, and then discard it quickly if it's not. And so thankfully I had that wiring in some capacity, but that's how I make it real. That's how when I learn something, I'm like, man, like this is a total waste of my life if I'm not changing my behavior. So I need to go in and basically split test that paradigm or that reality. It's either useful for me in my life or it's not, and I'm going to disregard it. But one thing I learned is like, I'm not going to disregard it with judgment. Because when other people do it, the proclivity is like, well, I tried that and that doesn't work. Well, that just
Right,
wasn't
right.
useful for me. Maybe it's useful for you. So I could do that. And it's helpful to not for me to not judge other people, for me to not judge myself. Because the stuff that I was doing 12 years
Yeah,
ago,
yeah.
I don't do that anymore, right? And so that's the bridge between, okay, I've got a habit for learning. I love learning. I'm curious. I've learned that curiosity is this bridge. But when I get something and I'm like, cool, what's the filtering mechanism that I can put in place so that I'm very intentional? I'm at cause. I'm not at effect with what I choose to make habitual in my life. And I go
Oh,
all the way
man.
in on it.
So much good. There's so much good stuff here, and there's a bunch of different little things that I want to go down, avenues that I want to go down. But there's a couple things I want to make sure I draw out in what you said. And there's a lot of depth here. I think, first of all, your point about establishing habits, the way I've always thought about it and the way I talk about it in the book is you establish your identity, because then it makes it a lot easier to take the actions that are consistent with that identity. It's got to start with the identity. And once you've got the identity set, then it's just a matter of taking the actions that are consistent with the identity. And eventually you get enough that your rational mind has recognized that that's true, that this identity that you've established. And so I say all the time, it's not fake it till you make it, it's be it till they see it. And by the way, the they that's the most important is your mind inside that sees you are what you are saying. And so I love that you described just start and don't stop, because that's taking the actions that are consistent with that identity that then makes that habit a character producing, results producing, happiness and joy producing identity that you have set out on. So I love that. I also really appreciate your point about how you both get into the right space of energy with curiosity, but also how you stay in that space by not bringing judgment and energy that pulls you down when you're learning and you're taking a different course. And I think the way you describe that is really powerful for people, because when they do it the other way, not only does it rob them of that path that they're going down, and we all do this at times, but we start to develop a habit that takes that approach instead of a learning, trying, testing, figuring things out approach, and it creates a calcified way of moving through life that doesn't produce the best outcomes for us. And so I really appreciate that point. I hope the audience hears that, of when you learn and you take a different approach, there's no reason to beat yourself up about it. You can stay in that place of positive energy. By the way, I don't know if you've read this book, but to me, what you've described is really a practice of, you've described a couple of things. One, Joe Dispenza's book about breaking the habit of being yourself, and the other one is Power versus Force. And have you read that book?
Yeah.
It talks. It's basically, for those who haven't read it. And I think is it Michael Singer that wrote Power versus Force? I think that's who it was.
I think so. Yep.
I might be getting that wrong, but
I could be wrong, but it sounds familiar. I'm tempted to Google it, but I'm just going to say for it.
It's such a fascinating book, though, because it breaks down all of the energy spectrum from positive to negative, essentially, and it assigns a point value to it, essentially. And what you just heard Joe describe here as power and pain, it's what the author describes, and he goes through all of the different kinds of emotion, and he talks about how some of them are extremely positive and very, bring really great energy, and others are awful. And he has kind of his polar ends, and then he has a spectrum of types of energy, and it's really, really impressive how he breaks it down. But I've never heard what you described just now, Joe, as the bridge between the two sides as being curiosity. And I think that's really, I think that's fascinating and really enlightening when we think about it that way. So thank you so much for sharing that. We could geek out on the mindset stuff for a long time. I'm confident of that. But I hope that what we've done is brought a little bit more perspective to what, I've shared with our audience many times, or what I write about in the book, that it does start with mindset, and then it flows into our vision. And our vision for our lives begins with that identity. And so, I've always looked at our identity as being kind of that where you cross over from the realm of your mindset into your vision for yourself and then how you actually live your life. And I appreciate the way you've talked through your identity and the things that you needed to do to expand it in order to create space for entrepreneurship. And just want to honor you for the learnings of 5 businesses, 3 that were great successes and 2 that were great failures. But they're all great, right? The things we learn and the ways that we grow and develop are really what it's all about. So thank you for sharing that. Anything else you want to add on to the mindset aspect before we wrap up here?
The last thing I'll say is that, I have this concept called prime minds. It's like a great idea is the first time it's birthed into the world. It's like a pebble thrown into a still pond. It creates these ripples. And, one thing that I've observed is that these ideas have carried over time.
I think we might have lost you. So, there we go.
So these ideas,
Joe, we lost you for just a second. You're saying, we lost you for just a second. You were saying that the idea is like a pebble thrown into a pond.
Yeah, so the idea, I have this concept called prime minds. It's like, think about a still pond and you throw a pebble in the middle of the pond. It creates these ripples, right? Well, that's what good ideas do over the ages is like, if you go back, you can find the echo of that idea. Like the stuff that's in Joe Dispenza's book, right, in Power and Force, it's also in Think and Grow Rich. And if you read Dale Carnegie's book on public speaking, it's the same thing where he talks about embodying it. And nowadays a more modern version is James Clear talked about it in his book Atomic Habits. And you could just keep going back and seeing these ideas echo. And so that's the thing I love is when I get a good insight or idea, I try to go back to the source to figure out what's the closest place where the pure uncut idea came from. And along that way, I pick up all these cool distinctions. So from a mindset perspective, the reason I'm bringing that up is because that's what strengthens my curiosity. So curiosity is like a muscle. You have to develop it. It's like, if you're listening to this, it's not easy to get what might be perceived as a negative stimulus in your life and to not have a negative reaction. It's a muscle. You have to pause and go, okay, well, that was a stimulating thing. Why did that happen? But it's a bit of a muscle. And so I've found the more I train my curiosity, the more I have available to use when things aren't feeling great or maybe shouldn't feel great.
I love that. And I'm going to put a fine point on this. A smile with, can do wonders when you're in that place and you can take the bridge one way or the other. And so maybe I wish we could, kind of spell that out, but it's just, it's just a smile and, let's look at that. So I appreciate you modeling that. And I recognize that for when we're in that, I recognize when all of us are in that tough time, that curiosity, which can be sparked by a simple smile and a it gets us looking at things the right way and creates a different energy as we're learning. So thank you for sharing that. Where can people learn more about you, Joe? I'd love for people to be able to go deeper on some of the things you've shared, whether it's the AI or the mindset stuff. This has been a great conversation.
Yeah, probably the best way is you could follow me on Instagram, at Joe Stolte Live, or just Google my name, Joe Stolte. Find me on Instagram, and then just DM me the word newsletter if you want to learn more about Daily.ai. I'm happy to get you some free resources or set you up with a demo. And then we'd just be publishing content on Instagram on mindset and leadership and automation, AI, marketing, all that kind of stuff. So give me a follow there, and that's the best ways to get in touch with me.
Awesome. All right. Well, Joe, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, your experience as an entrepreneur, the cool things you're doing now with AI and helping marketers and business owners and entrepreneurs get their messages to the right person at the right time, right channel, right offer, being more effective in the work that we're doing. And so I really appreciate you spending your time with us today. Look forward to continuing our partnership and finding ways that we can work together. And for everybody out there who is taking away some different things here, I would submit to you that the most powerful concept we just talked about is being in a positive place of energy, and the bridge to that is curiosity. And if you're struggling to muster that curiosity, just put a smile on your face and say, Until next time, everybody, this has been another episode of the Conquer the Chaos podcast. We look forward to seeing the great things you do out there as you conquer and grow in your business. Take care. Thanks so much for listening. Subscribe right here on YouTube or in your favorite podcast app to make sure that you don't miss a single episode of the Conquer the Chaos podcast. And hey, if you like this episode, let's get this out to more entrepreneurs. We all know that it is not easy to grow a great business and a great life. And so Let's get this message out to others. Make sure that you hit the like button, that you comment, and that you share it with others so that we can help other entrepreneurs build a great business and a great life as they conquer the chaos. Keep going, keep serving, and keep growing.